I'm going to talk to you about how your body, your female body, supports the birth of your baby. I love anatomy. The more I learn about the body, the more amazed I am. And I find this is a really helpful tool in my classes to show women what your baby will do to move through the pelvis and how your body has evolved beautifully to help this happen. So the female pelvis is different from the male pelvis. It's broader from side to side. That's why we tend to have curvier hips. And the inlet, the pelvic inlet, is wider from side to side, whereas the outlet is wider from front to back. This tailbone actually moves a lot more in real life in a pregnant woman than it does on my model. So these joints, through the pregnancy, these three joints are being affected by the pregnancy hormones, especially by the hormone relaxin, which sounds like relaxing, but it doesn't have the final G. So these are softening these joints. So whereas normally we think of the pelvis as a very sort of solid structure, actually there is some give in it. And I've seen some amazing videos where during the birth, as this baby's head is really descending deep into the pelvis, this whole section of the sacrum actually is able to move back. These ischial tuberosities move out to the sides, and the sacrum actually has room to move back and give your baby a bit more space to move through. There's also something called counternutation. So as the baby's head enters in, the top of the sacrum moves away, the tailbone moves in, so this whole structure can swivel slightly, and then as the baby's head moves lower down through the birth canal, it swivels the other way. So there's all sorts of ways that physically your body is helping to accommodate this baby moving down. So just to show you with the baby, I've borrowed a doll from my daughter. So probably your baby will be a bit bigger than this one. So first of all, the baby is going to move into the pelvis in a sideways position because the baby's head is longer from front to back. Because the inlet is longer from side to side, they're going to start by slotting in sideways. And the arms and legs will tend to be sort of snuggled in. And then the baby tends to move around so that they're facing backwards. They turn 90 degrees so that the baby's head can now fit through the outlet, which is longer from front to back. And then they keep on turning. Of course, your baby won't have a baby grow on. Keep on turning for the shoulders to move through because they're wider from side to side. And then the rest tends to come out fairly easily because the biggest parts have come through. So it's this amazing dance where the baby is twisting and turning to come out. Something that's very important to understand about the pelvis is that depending on how we position the pelvis, we can actually give the baby more wriggle room. So if we use this example to show something about the space inside the pelvis, this is just coloured water. I want you to think at the moment the surface area is roughly circular. If I tip the jar, it becomes elliptical. There's a bigger surface area, and you can do this if you've got a water bottle to hand. Have a look at it upright and then have a look at it as it tips over. So if you can see the circle here and then I tip it over, it becomes elliptical. There's more surface area. So the same is true of your pelvis in terms of the amount of surface area that we can create inside. So if we think for a moment how we're positioned when we're in neutral, these are our sitting bones underneath. So rather than thinking of a pelvic bowl that we normally talk about, the whole structure is actually tipped much more forwards. So if you were sitting up nice and straight at the moment, you could reach behind and feel your sacrum. That would be right behind you. If you're actually relaxing back on the sofa, it starts to tip back. So we can really affect our posture by how we're sitting. We affect what's happening inside as well. So if this is neutral, I'm standing up at the moment, both feet underneath me, I can come into an asymmetrical position and create more space inside the pelvis just by tipping from side to side. So to do this in real life, you might bring one foot up onto a stairs, then you switch, bring the other foot up, and you're walking up the stairs, and there's some movement from side to side with your pelvis. Or imagine that you're getting into the bath and you have to really lift your leg up high and then you put it down. So every time we do this, we're creating a different kind of space inside. And you can see these ischial points here that are sticking out into the pelvis. This kind of asymmetrical movement helps your baby navigate these bony structures. Another thing to mention is we usually see women lying on their backs to give birth. So if I was lying on my back, the sacrum would be flat on the bed and your baby would have an uphill to come out. Can you see? Let me swap hands. So lying flat on my back, my legs are down this way, my head's up this way, and the baby would have to come up and over the tailbone against gravity to come out. In an active birth, where we're moving around, so let's say we're standing up, we've got our feet on the ground, or we're kneeling on the ground, that tailbone's out the way, there's a clear route there for your baby to come out with no barriers, no bony barriers in the way. So how we position ourselves during the labour makes a massive difference. It might be that you feel a lot of pressure on one side. It might be the baby's head is pushing against a nerve in the pelvis somewhere. And you work out that by bringing that foot forwards, the pressure goes. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. It means that you are working with your baby to make things as comfortable as possible for you. And so you can be moving around, making things as comfortable as you can all the way through, choosing different positions. There is no reason that you couldn't lie on There's no reason that you couldn't lie down during the birth if you were beginning to be tired, but rather being flat on your back, you could go on one side, and that means the bed is now under here, and you can move the pelvis really easily. What midwives have said to me is that if a woman is lying on her back for some reason, probably because she's seen it on TV and she just assumes that's what she has to do, what she'll try and do is push down with her feet so she's got room to lift and adjust the pelvis. So she'd push into her feet, be able to lift her bottom off the bed, but it's very awkward. You try that if you lie on your back and you don't have much wriggle room. If you've got your feet up in stirrups, it's called the lithotomy position, it's even harder because your feet are stuck against the stirrups and you've got no room to move. There are always options, so if they want you to be on the bed to help monitor you more easily, instead of being on your back, you might find that if you are on your hands and knees, that you'll be more comfortable because you've got much more movement available. They can still easily see what's happening. You can rest on the end of the bed during contraction, but move in between. You've got options available to you. So during the birthing journey, during the labour, think about how if your pelvis is able to move in different directions, your baby also has more wriggle room to move into the best position to come down and out. I want to give you an example. So I had one lady a few years ago and she was having a baby boy. And the one thing she was really anxious about was forceps. She went through the birth and at a certain point decided to have an epidural, and she was able to get some rest. And then the midwife said to her, things aren't progressing as quickly as I'd like. I want this baby to be moving down more than he is. So I'm going to go and speak to the consultant and see whether it might be time to consider forceps. So at this, she took a deep breath. Oh, I don't want that. And she remembered something that I talked about in the weekly pregnancy class, which is called the Gaskin manoeuvre. So this is completely all about the positioning of the pelvis. So with a a mobile mix epidural. You can still move a little bit, so it's good to have somebody with you to make sure that you're steady. So she asked her husband, please get me off the hospital bed. I want to get down on the floor and try this Gaskin manoeuvre. It just popped into her head, something I'd said in class weeks and weeks ago. So she went onto all fours and she took one leg, she just chose which one felt more comfortable, to bring it all the way forwards, even in front of the hand, so that you can imagine how big a movement that is to step that forwards. Let me get my model pelvis. So from relaxing, being in the epidural, flat on her back, with not so much space for the baby to move, she got onto all fours, so this is in neutral, and then she took one foot all the way forwards. And this Gaskin manoeuvre can mean that it's getting this out the way. So whether it was the baby's head or the baby's shoulder that maybe was trapped behind that barrier, by making that big physical movement, the baby was able to wriggle into another position. So I want you to remember, if you can move your pelvis, your baby can move as well. If your pelvis is stuck and you can't move, it's so much harder for your baby to move as well. It's more effort for your baby, it's more effort for you. The baby isn't passive in all of this. The baby is pushing with the legs. He or she wants to be born and meet you too. But if they're pushing against that uphill route, it's going to be a lot harder than if you've created space by moving around. I hope that helps. There's a separate video showing you different positions that are really helpful during labour, so do check that out. I've mentioned before how important it is to drink water to keep hydrated. Your labour might go on for quite some hours and you need to keep hydrated for your body to be able to work. Alongside that it's really important also to wee on a regular basis. So I want you to imagine this yellow balloon is a bladder. It's full of wee, hence the colour that I've chosen, and it's sitting inside your pelvis. So this is a distended bladder. It's really, you've not gone for a wee for a long time if it's this big. But can you see how it's blocking the exit for your baby? So if I just bring my doll, the baby's trying to move down, there's no possibility for that baby to get through. So it's really important that you drink water. So don't not drink water so that this doesn't happen. You must drink water, but also go to the toilet on a regular basis so there's plenty of space for your baby to get through. I would actually write that on your birth plan, you know, in sort of use a highlighter on the top of it to remind yourself, and so your birth partner remembers as well. Keep offering you drinks, but keep going to the toilet. And sometimes just, you know, going to the toilet and moving around, because when you're heavily pregnant, you don't sit straight back onto the toilet, you know, you sort of put one hand down and lurch from side to side. All of that is helping your baby find the really optimal position, giving your baby that extra space. So although you might not always feel like it, please keep going to the toilet. I want to explain a little bit more about how the uterus works. It's a muscular organ and it has 3 types of muscle. So I've got a balloon, you'll never see balloons in the same way again. So excuse the lights that are shining on it. I want you to see that there are long muscles that run down, and there are the round muscles that run across, and there are also spiral muscles that I haven't drawn on. Now you might really feel the round muscles during the pregnancy, particularly as the baby suddenly starts to get bigger. Often people talk about pelvic pain, but actually they realise it's not in the joints itself, it's more in the muscular structure of the uterus as it's expanding. So you might have actually experienced those round muscles already. In the first stage of labour, so the part that is concentrating on dilation, on opening up a space for the baby to come out, it's the long muscles that are working. So these that go up and down. And it's working like you're putting on a roll neck jumper and pushing your head through. So they're squeezing and drawing up towards the top of the uterus and then relaxing. Contractions drawing up and relaxing. And in that way, it's opening up the cervix. So that happens first. And then once you're at full dilation, the work changes. So the uterus is reorganizing what it's doing. That's the transition bit. And we'll talk about that more in another video. And then for the second stage, to actually push the baby down and out, it's the round muscles that start to take over. And it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. They're squeezing from the top, squeezing, squeezing, squeezing all the way down to try and push the baby down and out. At the same time that this is happening, the spiral muscles are also working, and they're squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing in a clockwise direction to help the baby turn and twist through the pelvis. It's just absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing when you think about all of this is happening. So these spiral muscles squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing. And I couldn't find that in any of the anatomy books. It was an independent midwife that taught me about these spiral muscles. So it just goes to show how actually there's a lot of mystery still surrounding it. This isn't explained to us. And I think the more we understand about how the uterus works, the less scary the contractions are, and the more we can realise how clever our body is. And that's why I tend to use the word contractions in my classes, because I think as you begin to understand the anatomy, it becomes less of a scary thing, and you just realise that it's a muscle contracting, and then there's the expansion where you can rest. If you don't like the word contraction, if it's still too much of a charge for you, even after listening to all the relaxation tracks, feel absolutely free to replace it with the word surge or wave or whatever works for you. But the body will be working hard. So contraction, it feels like, some work is happening, and that's right. We want the contractions to be strong and effective. They're moving your wonderful baby from inside your body to come out. And through this course, we're working with our bodies to help that happen as smoothly and as comfortably as we can. I love visual props. I think they really help you to understand what's going on. So in this one, I've got a ping pong ball, I don't know if you can see inside, that's representing the baby's head. And I've got a balloon that's representing the uterus. So it would be a bit bigger than this. But just to show the action of how the baby's head is moving down and is actually helping to stretch the cervix open. It's a bit like putting a roll neck jumper over your head. And that tissue is very elastic. So that means it stretches and it goes back again. That's really important to know when you're thinking about how much it needs to stretch. When you're 10 centimetres dilated, it's really thinned. That's called effacement, thinned, and then dilation is where it's opening. But all that stretching is possible because it's elastic, and then once the baby's head has come out, it shrinks back again. The contractions, first of all, start working lower down to open the cervix, and then later on you're pushing from the top, like I was explaining before. With the balloon, it's a simple structure. It's not as complicated and beautifully evolved as your uterus is, but just to give you an idea. So as the baby's actually moving down and out, the contractions are squeezing more from the top, and the baby's head is moving down, and as a contraction finishes, it might move slightly up. That can be a bit disconcerting if your birth partner's down that end looking at the baby's head coming, because with the contraction they might say, I can see the head, I can see hair. And then it looks like the baby's head is disappearing inside again. It's just the contraction ending. Probably in the next contraction the baby will stay down. So can you see how it's stretching open? Next contraction comes. Whoa! And there were some alarming noises there with the squeaking and the shooting out of the head. That doesn't happen because the baby has a body as well that needs to come out. So the baby's head comes, and then you have to wait. Shoulders lining up in the pelvis like we were talking about before. then the shoulders will gradually come down. So it's not as dramatic as the ping pong ball coming out, but I think it just beautifully shows how, as the contractions are happening, the baby's moving down, creating space to come through. I wanted to talk a little bit more about positioning, not actually during the labour, but during the end of pregnancy. During the third trimester, it's really good to think about your posture in everyday activities. So right now you might be watching this in a really comfortable position on the sofa, relaxing, but I would want you to begin to be a little bit more upright or even leaning forwards. And this comes again to how the pelvis affects the positioning of the baby. And if the baby gets used to being in a good position towards the end of pregnancy, they're more likely to start the labour in a good position. The baby can turn at any point, so it's not something to get really worried about if your baby's not in an optimal position right now. So they talk about optimal fetal position, OFP, and it just means the best position to start the labour. So let me bring my doll back here. So you might have heard of back-to-back labours. So if you imagine the spine continues up from the back of the pelvis there. So that's the mum's back. And a back-to-back labour is where the baby's back is snuggled in against the mum's back. So it's called an occipito-posterior or back-to-back labour. And we try to sort of do things with our posture at the end of pregnancy to avoid the baby starting off in that position, because often those labours can be a bit longer, they can be more intense. And I would definitely recommend, when you look at the video for different positions that you can use during labour, you would want a position where you're leaning right forwards, so your belly creates this lovely hammock shape for the baby's back to turn into. So the baby's back would rest in the hammock shape as you lean forwards, rather than being back to back. So the baby can turn around. So the optimal position is usually shown as the baby being on the mother's left side. And for many years, I was like, why do they always show it on the left side rather than the right side? I couldn't find any information about it. As I said, the baby can turn in utero, so it doesn't matter if the baby's on the other side. But the reason is, and it took me years to find this out, it's all to do with how the uterus contracts. It has the long muscles, the round muscles, and the spiral muscles that I showed you on the balloon. And during contraction, the spiral muscles are helping to turn the baby. That's how the baby can turn, and they turn the baby in a clockwise direction. So if your baby is on the left-hand side of the mum's body, so the back curving into the left side of the bump, the baby's got the shortest distance to go. The uterine muscles are contracting, helping the baby turn clockwise. The baby faces towards the mother's back to come out through the outlet of the pelvis and continues that way. If the baby's the other way around, then as the uterus contracts in a clockwise direction, it might be that the baby's turning sort of 270 degrees and then coming down. It doesn't matter. That's all very possible. But the main thing is, at the end of the pregnancy in the third trimester, if you're choosing these nice upright positions where the pelvis is in neutral rather than tipping back, or even a little bit tipped forward, so you're creating that lovely hammock shape for your baby to rest in, your baby's getting used to being in that position. It'll be easier for your baby to start the labour from there. Sometimes babies are in a breech position, so the baby's head is up and the feet or even the bottom might be presenting. If that's happening, like 34 weeks, there's still time for the baby to move, and the baby is an intelligence, it's got that instinctive intelligence to know which way round they should be. There is positioning that can help a baby to turn out of a breech position, and I would definitely look at a website called spinningbabies.com. That's spinningbabies.com, and they have lots of free content. There are videos you pay for, but there's lots of free content as well. And just showing you different ways that you can encourage the baby to move. Sometimes it's to do with tight muscles or tight ligaments inside the mother's body, and some of these positions can help create extra space for the baby to move. I've also had a lot of success with my pregnant clients with chiropractors, particularly with a technique called the Webster technique. And again, they're trained in creating that extra bit of space to help the baby to move. You might also be offered, if your baby's breech, cephalic version, where the professional would physically turn the baby around. And it's also worth asking about whether there's a centre nearby you that has experience of vaginal births. So it might be something you want to explore, even if you need to transfer to a different centre, sort of away from your nearest hospital. So even with a breech baby, there are options, and just think it all the way through of what feels right for you. So at the end of this video, I want you to feel that your body is amazing. It's truly incredible. And I can't emphasize enough, if you practice listening to the breathing techniques, the relaxation tracks, doing the yoga sequences, maybe even try the dance one, as you connect with your body and you start to really deeply listen to your body and see how the mind and body are truly connected, this will have a big impact on the birthing of your baby. It's not that you're a passive vessel, it's not that you're a machine. Your body's not going to behave exactly like every other woman. We're individuals, our bodies can be different. And you've lived in your body a while, and you can know or learn, if this is new to you, what helps you to relax, what movements make you comfortable during pregnancy. Get used to moving your body and adjusting to be as comfortable as possible, and it becomes even easier during the birthing journey.